Welcome back to Betting the Limit. I'm your host, Drew Shore. Today we're going to be joined by a good friend of mine who became internet famous after winning a $1 million prize in fantasy sports in 2014. Since then, he has founded and sold several companies, including Fantasy Labs, and is also a partner of mine in our new company, Swing Easy. Welcome to the podcast, Peter Jennings.
Thanks, Drew. What an intro. Feeling a little bit of the burn today. You made 4 birdies on me. We doubled our birdie bet, and of course, that spawned 4 birdies, so nice work.
I think I'm the first guy to shoot over 90 at Colorado Golf Club with 4 birdies, but I'll take it.
Yeah, the birdies were worth a lot today. But yeah, stoked to be here and excited to chat with you.
You look great, first of all. I don't know.
Just trying to copy you, I guess.
That was actually not planned, but thanks for doing this.
Yeah, happy to be here.
I want to start with you and I became friends, I think, was it 2020 or 2021 on the golf course?
Yeah, on the golf course 21.
And I remember hearing a little bit about you before we played, and someone told me, they were like, hey, you don't know Peter Jennings, and we had never met at the time. And someone's like, oh, you should meet him and play golf. You guys will be best friends. And 3 years later, we've had a lot of good times, and hopefully many more together in the future.
Yeah, we've had a lot of fun. I think golf is like one of the best places to meet people. You get to learn so much about people's character. And yeah, I just love competing, and you get to see people at their highs and lows on the golf course. So yeah, we have a ton in common, obviously, and started chatting about a lot of those things on the golf course. And yeah, I think for me, that's the best place to build relationships is the golf course.
I'm excited for this party tomorrow.
Yeah, party's going to be great. We got a good setup. It's going to be big. I think we're going to have a good amount of guests. Thanks to Kyle Quincy, great event. It should be a great setup.
Yeah, if there's ever a guy who's not going to turn down fun at his house, it's Kyle. So he definitely came through big for us.
Yeah, Kyle's always coming through for us.
I think I heard you tell a story that I'll never forget, but I feel like everyone introduces you as something different. I've heard people talk about you as the crypto whiz, the daily fantasy sports king, but I think, or just complete kind of stud of an entrepreneur. But hearing different stories you told, you almost had this in you when you were like 6 years old. You were like selling Pokemon cards at lemonade stands. What was your childhood like, and did you always have a brain for math, numbers, and entrepreneurship?
Yeah, my childhood was awesome. I feel really lucky. My parents were great. Grew up kind of upper middle class in a great place here in Colorado in the Ken Carroll Valley. Everyone's door was unlocked. You could bike to meet your friends. It was just an awesome spot to grow up. And yeah, I've always had kind of the entrepreneur / math bug. Love math growing up. And yeah, I mean, the closest I ever came to getting suspended was from actually trading Pokemon cards with my classmates. I actually was like pretty good in school, got good grades, broadly didn't get in much trouble, but literally almost got suspended because parents were complaining that I was ripping their kids off with Pokemon cards. And it was a standard trade, like 6th grade, here, I'll trade you 100 cards. I just want that one card. So the 100 cards that are worth nothing for the one card that's worth a lot. And that was effective with my fellow 4th and 5th graders.
Buy low, sell high.
Yeah. And it was great. But yeah, sold Jolly Ranchers on the bus, lemonade stands. I was always like trying to hustle to make some money. And I bought my first mutual funds when I was 11 years old. So I've always been like interested in numbers, math, money.
How did you know about mutual funds at 11 years old? Because that would have been the last thing on my mind.
I was asking questions all the time. I wanted to be a millionaire at the time. That was like my main goal as a young kid. Wanted to be a millionaire. Wish $1 million was a little bit more now. But yeah, I watched videos, watched movies. I was just kind of obsessed with it. And I learned that investing was one way that you keep your money working for you. So I bought mutual funds when I was 11 years old, and yeah, it worked out pretty well.
You clearly were into math and numbers at a young age, but one of the reasons you and I became good friends is your love for sports. Were you playing all different types of sports growing up, or what was your athletic background?
Sports. I wish I was better at sports. I had a good trajectory when I was younger because I grew really early. I'm shorter now than I was in 8th grade. So I love playing basketball, baseball, football, tennis. Wish I played golf, but love playing sports. I think you learn so much from sports. I mean, I want to hear your perspective, but I learned more from sports than I did from school, just learning how to win, how to lose, how to interact with people. So I absolutely loved it. Unfortunately, didn't have the athletic talent of someone like yourself, but yeah, I just learned so many great things. And to this day, like my favorite thing, my perfect day is to wake up and, do something athletic with my friends, which is why we've become so close. We've had some battles. You got me today, but yeah, what's your perspective on just like what you learned from sports growing up? Because to me, that was like bigger than anything else, including school.
Yeah, I mean, my whole childhood, like I had three younger brothers. I was very fortunate to we were all pretty close in age, where we were able to compete at everything. So whether that was roller hockey in the driveway, we'd get up at 7 a.m. and play till 5 p.m. Whether that was football in the backyard, like someone was always winning, someone was always losing, and those are some of the best times I ever had. And I feel very lucky just to have like three brothers who are so close in age. Where, as you know, you've gotten
Yeah,
close with a couple
give
of them.
me the breakdown. Like, obviously, you're the older brother, so you got to win a lot when you're
Yeah, I
growing up.
did. And now, unfortunately, I'm winning less and less at everything. As you know, Nick kind of, even though I hate to admit this, is like slightly better than me at everything. Quentin was a great athlete, but had terrible hips. He had he's had two major hip surgeries now, and now he's at the chiropractor because he's worried about his golf trip because his other hip's bugging him again. And then my youngest brother, Baker's a complete stud who saw us go play hockey in Russia and decided rather to go to DU just to go to Harvard. So he's working on Wall
He's
Street.
playing his cards well.
Yeah, he's working on Wall Street, crushing it. And Nick and I always say that he owes us about 15 years worth of living expenses. So I'm hoping he's running a company one day and can hire both of us to work for him.
Yeah, I'm so jealous that you had that, just like growing up with like your brothers. I had great friends, and like when I said I had a good childhood, like grew up in a great place, wasn't super spoiled, like had to work for things, but also just I was safe and I had the ability to go hang out with tons of friends. And like all we did was like, okay, let's go play football, let's go play basketball. And I think you learn so much from that. And it's a great way to build relationships.
Yeah, one of your qualities that I respect the most out of you is just your work ethic. And I feel like you went from selling Pokemon cards on the bus to then taking this job at Red Rocks. And you told me a story one time about how you, of course you, of all people, were able to find a way to sell more beer than anyone else ever at Red Rocks. How are you able to do that?
I learned from the guy who was the king. But yeah, I actually started at Coors Field selling hot dogs, which was not a good gig. Selling hot dogs, you're making like minimum wage, a little bit more. But it's commission based. Then I was able to sell ice cream cones because I moved up a little bit in seniority. And then I was making a couple $100 a game for Rockies games. And like, bad weather, ice cream cones wasn't a great thing, but I was always just like, okay, once I can sell beer, I'm going to start crushing it. And beer vending was something that taught me more than anything. Actually, I think one of the CEOs of Goldman Sachs had a similar job and said he learned more from that job. And I feel so fortunate that I was able to get that gig. It's a commission-based job. You make money on tips. So obviously you're incentivized to work really hard, move fast. And then the tip part of it, just like, hey, I see this guy's wearing a Red Sox hat. Ask him about that. Or try to make small talk and figure out what makes people tick. If you make that connection, you might have a repeat buyer. So I think I hustled that game pretty hard. I was also fortunate at that time to be in relatively good shape. In my competition, the other vendors were older and not as fit, I would say. Rockies games were great. The first day I ever made $1,000 in one day was the Rockies play-in game against the San Diego Padres. One of the most fun times. And I was always looking to get into Red Rocks because Red Rocks was like, you'd make 2-3x what you would at a baseball game. So Red Rocks was an incredible gig.
Now every time you hit a bad golf shot or miss a shot playing basketball, you blame your back hurting from all the beers you carried at Red Rocks.
That was the one trade-off that I didn't consider. I wore a back brace, but I didn't realize, maybe I could make an extra $100 that day, but at the cost of my back in the future. But I was hyper competitive. I always wanted to sell the most beer. And I do think it's just like a good thing in general, like the service industry, beer vending, just teaches you the right lessons growing up to work hard, treat people well. And you can see it when you go out with other people. Like, I don't know your experience, but there's people that just treat everyone well. And like, it's such a blessing to be able to like go to a restaurant and have someone serve you. So being on the other side, I think I learned a lot from it. And yeah, some of the Red Rocks stories, one last one is there's a place at Red Rocks where there's a hidden bathroom. So there's a bathroom below the stairs. And that bathroom had 20 stalls, or urinals/stalls. There's a bathroom above it that only had 2 urinals and 2 stalls, and everyone would wait in line at this spot. So I would always make sure to find out when the intermission was. So I made friends with the guy who had the schedule of the actual times. I'd know exactly when the intermission was. I'd go to that spot. I'd yell my line, "Who likes beer?" And then I would tell people who were waiting in line that there's a secret bathroom. And that was just an absolute recipe to make a ton of money because someone goes from waiting in line, have to pee, to then getting the relief. What are they going to do next? They're going to buy a beer from you and they're going to tip you well. So Red Rocks is fun.
It's funny hearing that story because I feel like so much of your success later in life was attributed to how well people like you. And you just being friends with the guy who planned out the whole show, you were able to make a lot more money.
Oh, it was incredible. Like just knowing the time. So like at the beginning of the thing, you want to be at the entrance when people are coming in, then you want to be in the stands, then I'd want to get to my spot for the intermissions. So I learned so much. Red Rocks is such a special place. And I hope for my kids that they're in a position where they have to do something in the service industry, because I think it just teaches you great life lessons.
As you're doing this job, are you thinking about where you want to go to college? Because as you and I have talked about, you ended up making your college decision based off of where you could afford to buy a house. But when I was 16 or 17 years old, I literally was like trying to find money to eat at Subway. But I thought it was pretty cool that your entrepreneurial mind came through even when deciding to pick a college. And I want to hear about how you decided to go to CU or CSU rather than go to CU.
Yeah, so I always knew I wanted to stay in state because it was more cost effective. I had started, invested in mutual funds. I had started saving money and investing. I was doing the beer vending plus playing poker. So I was able to build a bankroll. And my next thought was, hey, it's going to be great. I can go buy a house, have my friends live with me, pay my mortgage, and I'll be in a great spot. So I started looking at real estate in Boulder and Fort Collins. And, I thought the delta between those two schools, obviously CU was ranked a little bit higher, but I thought the delta was like not a huge deal. And I had aspirations of being like a pro poker player. And ultimately the main decision was I could buy like an awesome house for a couple $100,000 in Fort Collins, and that same house would be over $1 million in Boulder. So I ended up going to CSU, had a great time, studied poker more than finance, but got a finance degree. What made you choose DU? Because you had like a choice of basically any school, right? Like you could have played anywhere. You were a hockey prodigy. Like what was attractive about DU?
Yeah, so growing up here, I was very spoiled just in a sense that I was able to skate like at Magnus Arena every day as a young kid. So the arena and kind of the school to me didn't have the appeal that it did from other kids just because I lived there pretty much every day as a kid growing up. So it wasn't until I moved away, I actually moved away from Denver when I was 13 and spent time in other places, that I was able to see kind of how special that program and place is. So once I moved away for a couple of years, I was able to come back, and it was just probably some of the best times of my life because my parents were at every game. My parents brought 10 friends to every game. I actually have 2 grandparents who are still alive on my dad's side. They sat like on the glass for pretty much all my games, all Knicks games. The only regret I have is if I would have stayed one more year, my senior year, I left school after 3 years, I could have played with Nick and Quentin. So I only played with Nick. He only played with Quentin. But if I could have stayed a senior year, we could have all 3 played together, and that would have been pretty cool.
Oh, that would have been so cool. We've talked about it. I mean, you and Nick played the same position. Did you guys ever think about mixing it up and being on the same line? Because you guys would have crushed. I know we've talked a little bit about that, but talk to me about kind of like why you guys ended up playing the same position and like how the college dynamic worked.
Yeah, so we both played center, and then it wasn't until later, right until I was about to retire, where we decided to play together. But we should have done that way earlier in our careers, especially in college, just because of the way we grew up, the stuff we watched. We think the game the exact same way. So I think we would have had a ton of success together, especially in North America. And unfortunately, we never got that opportunity, but Nick was able to have a great career. And
so were you, but like, so if you guys would have played together, don't you? I mean, you were, in my eyes, I don't know the team, but I imagine you're the 2 best players on the team. So it hurts not to have you guys together.
Yeah, but it was honestly like I was too stubborn to go to the wing, and he just didn't really know better. But like looking back, that was definitely something we should have done.
Which wing would have been a better spot for you guys?
Well, it's funny. This is a funny story. We had this debate. The 5 games we played together before my career was over, we went and played for one of his good friends, Marian Gavrik, owns a team in Slovakia. And we walked in the first day, and like when you walk into a hockey locker room, the lines are up on the board. And I can't remember who was playing center and who was playing wing, but like I looked at him and I was like, I'm playing center, you're playing wing. And he looked at me and he was like, I'm playing center, you're playing wing. And it's like a common joke in the NHL, like this games played thing. And so Nick, of course, went right to like way more NHL games played. Like I call the shots, you're moving to the wing. And then I went with, well, like, this isn't the NHL. You're a way better player, so you should be able to play anywhere. So I'm playing center, and I think I ended up playing center for a couple games until I lost a few faceoffs, and then he just he'd stare me down, and then he went in, and I don't think he lost one the rest of our time there. So safe to say, I ended up
left wing or right wing for you.
Probably left wing, but I mean, I think that one of the things I really encourage kids these days that I didn't realize is being able to play both is a huge advantage because I was very good when I was younger, so I always got to play center. But then you go to the NHL, and I would always get put on the wing, depending on what team I was on, and I had a really hard time adjusting to that and like really struggled at different points of the game on the wall. And I wish as a kid I would have spent more time kind of playing every position, and that's something I really encourage young kids to do, just because it makes you so much more versatile. Like even if we look at the lineup, like a lot of teams have 4 center spots, right? But there's 2 wings on every line, so it just gives you so much more flexibility. And I think that Nick was really fortunate that he got to play center most of his career, but it was just something that I was always getting tossed on the wing and I wasn't great at.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing in other sports. You look at like the NBA or basketball, like obviously the guys who go play college, they were the man in high school, and then they get to college, and maybe they still are, but a lot of times they have to evolve. And then for sure, from college going into the NBA, it's like, okay, I was the man, I was scoring all the points, the offense ran through me, but then you need to evolve into a certain role in the NBA, unless you're like a unicorn and one of the freaks that can just waltz in there like Wembanyama or LeBron or whatever. But knowing your role and like being able to evolve into that, I think is super important. And for kids, like, yeah, everyone wants to be the star pitcher or the shortstop or the, center. And I think being willing to adjust is something that's huge. And that, for me, like when we're playing sports now, I think it's just super important to like put people in position to succeed. And like, yeah, not everyone has to be like the star. And being able to adapt, I think, is huge.
We both love the NBA. What are your thoughts on the playoffs so far?
I wish the Suns were playing a little bit better. I think we both wish that, but it was amazing. I mean, that doubleheader with the Nuggets and that Knicks-Sixers game was incredible. I really hope we get the Nuggets and the Celtics in the finals because that's, the Nuggets are, in my eyes, a historic team. I really think they can go on a long run with Jokic, who's playing as good a basketball as anyone ever has. And then the Celtics team has been historically dominant. So I hope we get that finals. I really want to see it. But yeah, the West is super compelling, and we'll see in the East. I mean, I think the Celtics are just going to roll through it. But playoff basketball, similar to playoff hockey, is just way more compelling because there's a lot of just kind of wasted games in the regular season, whereas in the playoffs, you can just see the effort and just how kind of the strategy of the game changes. And yeah, I love the NBA playoffs.
You love basketball, and I feel like your basketball IQ for like someone who didn't play that much basketball is so high. How did you?
I played a little bit.
How did you get, like, I want to know, like, how did you learn so much about the NBA? Because, like, you can break down basketball as good as anyone that I know, including guys who played at a super high level. But, like, I wouldn't be able to do that in a lot of other sports other than hockey. How did you learn so much about the game of basketball?
I mean, I just absolutely love it. And yeah, I mean, again, 5'10" in 8th grade, 5'10" now, brutal. But I loved the game. Like, that's all I wanted to do when I was playing growing up. And I always kind of wanted to gain an edge mentally, just like I do in any sport. Like, if you can, obviously I'm not physically gifted, so I have to try to win mentally in a lot of things. And in basketball, I just always had a kind of a passion for the game, did a lot of reading on it, listened to people. And then, in my career in sports, basketball is probably the sport I've paid the most attention to. I'd watch every game for years and years and years. I'd had 4 TVs on the wall, so I'd watch all the games. And I was always just like kind of eating up all the nerdy analytics stuff. Daryl Morey has been a great mentor for me and my friends, and he's kind of the first analytics guy who really revolutionized basketball. He had the vision that like, hey, shoot 3-pointers. Those are better shots than the mid-range. Shoot points in the paint. And if you look at like the shot charts from like the
mid-range is dead.
Early 2000s to where it is now, it's literally exactly what Daryl Morey talked about because people have learned that these are the better shots. And like, yeah, I love competing, in our, 3-on-3, 4-on-4 games and like just putting people in position to succeed, knowing people's strengths and weaknesses. So I love the game. So much fun.
There's very few people in my life who I can be very open with about a lot of different things, and you're one of them. We talk about a ton of different things from life to 5-year, 10-year plan. Have you ever thought about working on like the basketball side?
Yeah, that used to be my dream, was to be a GM. And now I don't know if I'd want to do that with my family, but it'd be really, really cool. The dream now is to have a friend like you that hopefully you can buy the team and then I can just ride your coattails.
Yeah, we need to find a way to make some money. So
ownership in a team would be amazing. And, I've been really fortunate with Mark Cuban. He was our only investor in my first company. He's been so good to me and just learning from him, and he's living the dream. I mean, it's so cool. Obviously, it's super high aspiration to own a basketball team, but that would be the dream. We did own a New Zealand basketball team for a small stretch of time.
How'd that go?
It went well. We had a lot of fun. We actually went and saw them play the Phoenix Suns. That was I think a sharp bet that didn't play out exactly how we wanted to. Our bet was that a lot of young talent would go overseas at a young age versus going to college because they could sign a shoe deal. Like LaMelo Ball actually played in Australia.
Because more guys are starting to do that, right?
Yeah, but now with college, you have an incentive. With the new rules, you can obviously get compensated. But our bet was basically, if you're a superstar 18-year-old, why would you take the risk of going to college when you could go play in Australia or Europe or wherever, sign a shoe deal right away, get compensated right away, get insurance, get all those things. And yeah, we ended up selling the team, which I'm happy with. But
did you make or lose money?
Broke exactly even.
Broke exactly even.
So lost with time. But
how long did you own the team for?
A couple of years.
A couple of years.
Yeah.
Okay. And then from there, when I want to know, you're playing poker. I want to talk about poker.
Let's talk poker. Oh, perfect. Let's talk poker.
You and I had after I got crushed by you for a long period of time, you and I had a debate whether you were a professional poker player. So
Definitely
now
not.
on record, you're admitting you're a professional poker
I'm
player.
not a professional poker player.
Because I believe that there's footage online of you sitting at the table with some of the greatest poker players ever to play.
Anyone can sit with the greatest players. That's what makes poker great.
But you're not a
A
pro.
donkey like me can sit with Phil Hellmuth and Negreanu, and I'm definitely not a pro.
One of the biggest breaks in your professional career is you were able to pull a poker seat with Mark Cuban on one side of you and Tiger Woods on the other. How did that happen? And I want to hear a little bit about your friendship with Mark Cuban.
Yeah, so that was the best parlay of my life. That was like the single luckiest sequence that I had. I just left Boston, where I was working for a competitor to DraftKings, signed a brand ambassador deal with DraftKings. So I thought there was a big opportunity to basically play fantasy sports full time. So I wasn't an employee, I was just a brand ambassador. So I had incentives through DraftKings to promote the company. I could play fantasy full time, which I thought was like a crazy good opportunity. Moved back to Colorado with my now wife, Ashley, and really just went all in on kind of the industry. And fortunately had the best year of my life. Made tons of money, including that $1 million prize, which was like perfect timing. First live event in DraftKings in the Bahamas.
That's the one you had to wear a belt?
Yeah.
And you're holding up
Not
the
not
chest?
had to. I was proud of that belt. I was very proud of that belt. But yeah, so I won the $1 million, and then basically from there, DraftKings was exploding in growth, and they were using my likeness for a lot of their advertisements. I was on buses. We were doing stuff with ESPN, podcasts, all these different things. And because of that, they did an event with Tiger at Tiger Jam, where they were the main sponsor, and they wanted me to be in the event. So I paid half, they bought in half, and I drew a seat out of like, I don't know, there's probably like 70 seats, and I got the seat in between Tiger Woods and Mark Cuban, which was luckier than winning the $1 million.
How old were you when you won the $1 million? Like, were you in college at this time? Or?
No, it's 2014, so I was 26.
Okay. But I mean, you didn't have a lot of money at the time. Like, that was life-changing money?
Yeah, when I quit my job in 2012, I won the first six-figure prize, which is big money. That was 150 grand, which like doubled my net worth in 2012. I then spent a lot of that money living in Cambridge with like very little salary, just basically bleeding money. Moved back to Colorado, and that was when like things just really took off. So yeah, I was fortunate during that time. I went from having a couple hundred grand to, before I won the $1 million, I actually had like somewhere in that range. Then I won the $1 million, and like things just kind of took off.
And then after drawing that seat next to Cuban, you and him are friends. And I heard you say in a different podcast that so many people go up to Mark Cuban and pitch him immediately on something and basically ask for his money. But you kind of just went there, as you always do, and just are well liked by everyone and now have a great friendship.
Well, this is actually an important lesson. I think it's something that you do really well, and just in general for people. Like, if you meet someone, you shouldn't go up and be like, hey, what can you do for me? If you meet someone, especially someone you admire, it's like, hey, how can I help you, or what would be interesting to you? So with Mark, I just started talking to him about basketball, and my whole goal was literally like, I got to find some way that I can do a favor, something fun for Mark, like anything that would be relevant. So we chatted a ton about basketball, which was great. And then I just started sending him all this different stuff about, NBA players I thought were really intriguing, different analytics stuff. He also started sending me like, he gets pitched so many businesses. So he would send me all like the fantasy sports businesses that he was getting pitched. I would try to give him good feedback. And what happened was in 2015, this was after this poker tournament, if you remember, DraftKings was spending more money than like Coca-Cola or Geico on advertising in September. So it was like absolutely everywhere. It was honestly way too much promotion. And one of their employees won a big prize on a competitor, FanDuel. And that sparked this like whole controversy. At New York State shut down daily fantasy sports. So I reached out to Mark. I was like, hey, we started this company. Things are going great. Like, we're making tons of profit. Like, everything is up and to the right, but now we have all this industry risk. And what do we do? Like, I want to make sure our employees are, feeling good about this. Is there any way we can diversify the business? Like, any advice you have would be super helpful. And he wrote back instantly, just like, let me invest. I'll help you guys. And we didn't need the capital, but obviously when Mark Cuban's like, hey, I want to help you guys, you take the check, which we did. And Mark was like absolutely instrumental to helping the business and the industry. So he was like a keynote speaker at the fantasy events. He was lobbying with governments. He was super, super helpful, and he gave a lot of legitimacy to us and the space.
That's so cool. And that is something I've learned from you that I do try and take to my everyday life, just going into so many relationships with how can I help you? Was that something that you learned from your dad?
Yeah, I think my dad has always thought that way. And just, yeah, just reading, I think my mom, even more so, my mom is like the most selfless person I know. We grew up in the church, and she really just like had a big influence on kind of how I view the world. She's just so kind and selfless. She just tries to do everything for everyone else. And my dad is the same way in terms of like how he views the world and kind of his work. So I learned that, and just, yeah, just, you know how it's like when someone's just like, hey, what can you do for me? You're less inclined to want to help them. And just in life, like you get not even think about your own self-interest. It's just more fulfilling to like be helpful to others. And that's the best relationship you can have, is when there's like win-wins going on. Like we've had so many great experiences, and we've helped each other, and it's been awesome.
When daily fantasy sports became legal, you've talked about how you were so passionate about the industry that you actually think you took a little bit of your edge away, because you were basically telling so many people like different things that you were doing. And looking back, is that something that you wish you would have done differently, or is that something you're happy about because the space grew and everyone wins?
Yeah, I think I had an interesting set of incentives, and I don't in general like touts, which I clearly was, but I was trying to help people, and I think we really were. So for me, just from a personal standpoint, it definitely worked out because we had incentive around DraftKings, we had incentive around Fantasy Labs, which worked out really great. Taxes, as you know, when you make money in daily fantasy sports, you're paying ordinary income on all that. So you're paying 42, 43%, depending where you live, maybe more if you're in California. Whereas if you sell a business, especially if you've held it for a long time, there's huge tax incentives. So from a financial standpoint, everything worked out really well. I think I was really genuine and authentic in sharing kind of what I learned. And I definitely think that hurt my edge, but I don't really have regrets around it. I just think in general, I'm less of a fan of kind of touts. And that's something that I'm constantly trying to think about, is like, how can I provide value without being like, a sleaze or whatever, which you see a lot. Like there's crypto touts, stock. Like, here's a question for you. Which are the worst? Crypto touts, stock market touts, sports betting touts? Who do you think are like the most sleazy snake oil salesmen?
I feel like crypto touts would be my
Top?
top. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair.
Nick wanted me to ask. I called Nick on the way over here. He wanted you, because he knows you love touting. You love touting shit. If there's an altcoin that he could buy that has a chance to go 100x, what altcoin would you buy?
Yeah, I don't have an opinion on altcoins. I think Bitcoin is probably the thing I've had the most conviction around, and certainly from a portfolio standpoint, that's like far and away, the bulk of my crypto portfolio.
You are in this crypto daily fantasy sports world. When was the first time you heard about Bitcoin, and when was the first price you bought Bitcoin at?
So I bought Bitcoin in 2013. I'm trying to remember. It was like hundreds of dollars, but I did not view it at all as an investment. It was just a way to speculate on sports. So I didn't even think about it. I remember that Patriots-Falcons loss was like, hundreds of Bitcoin, which obviously now I really wish Tom Brady wasn't the GOAT and came back from that game. And I probably wouldn't have that Bitcoin now either, but I really it was kind of a currency to speculate on sports. And then I got really into it kind of in 2016, 17, the Ethereum ICO and just kind of Vitalik and what the Ethereum protocol was trying to achieve got me fascinated with crypto. So since then, I've been trying to learn and kind of be as involved as I can to just, it's hard to, it's such a complicated space. And I think just being in there just like helps you kind of understand what's going on a bit more. And I'm by no means an expert, but I try to get my hands dirty and learn as much as I can.
You're an expert, but if you were an athlete right now, so many of these athletes, it's been all in the public news about like some guys are trying to take salary and Bitcoin and stuff like that. If you were an athlete right now about to sign a big ticket, would you take any of it in Bitcoin if the team offered that to you?
Yeah, for sure. I would take some percentage of it. I mean, I think Bitcoin right now still has a lot of asymmetry. So that, and especially as like a young person, as an athlete, and I definitely want to hear your view on this, but if especially if you're getting a big salary, I would want a diversification, but also a lot of upside for the future. So, Bitcoin right now is like a 1.5 trillion market cap. It's basically 10% of the gold market cap. I think a compelling view for Bitcoin is that it's digital gold. In my view, in the long term, is that it'll overtake gold's market cap. So, you're looking at 10x from here. And again, not financial advice, but like, I think that it has the chance to flip it. So the asymmetry in Bitcoin is quite high. And that's kind of what you want as, if you're getting a big salary. Obviously, you can be safe with a good percentage of your money, but small portion of it, you want to take some risk. So I think Bitcoin makes a lot of sense. And I think the bigger thing that I want to hear your perspective on that I love to see in like the NBA, and I think it's happening in sports, is these athletes are now taking equity in endeavors that they're involved in. Instead of just taking cash, they've seen what's happened with Michael Jordan and his brand and LeBron and some of these people. They're saying, okay, you know, I'm going to give this person who wants to pay me to be involved in their company instead of taking cash or taking equity. And that's the diversification and the upside that I think makes sense for an athlete. But you have a lot of experience there. What's your perspective?
Yeah, so since I started working at Wasserman, in the hockey space, it had been so old school for so long. I feel very fortunate that I was able to work with a guy named Judd Moldaver, who represents Austin Matthews and Connor McDavid. And those are kind of the first guys to really transform marketing for hockey off the ice. So it's been really cool to kind of get a front row seat on how these guys are able to take equity in brands, because 10 years ago, like, guys wanted an appearance fee and basically a flat cash payment. And now it's really cool to see these athletes building up such big equity positions in a lot of these brands. And I think that Judd is kind of at the forefront of that. And it's been cool to kind of watch him navigate that space with those guys going forward.
So what do you think you would have done differently, just given your hockey career, just financially? Like, you got your contracts, like, how would you think about the things differently now?
Oh, there's a lot of things I wish I would have done differently financially. I think that I would have gotten myself more educated starting in college. Like, in college, you would have laughed. Like, this is really funny, but some classes I'd played poker on my computer in.
Right. I got caught playing poker in
Or,
class.
like, you know what I mean? All I was focused about was like making the NHL, and then you make the NHL.
But isn't that the right thing, just to start to interrupt, but like, shouldn't that have been your entire focus? Like, if you are great at hockey, like, everything's going to kind of take care of itself, right?
Yes, but I think you have other hours in the day to at least educate yourself on different topics. Like, I don't think that should take away, like, you can only train and think hockey for so long that I actually think my best year in hockey actually was the year. So I went to school for 3 years, left, had about 6 classes left, didn't take anything for 6 or 7 years, and then took classes like 6 or 7 years later. And that was actually my best year of hockey. And I do think there was something for me mentally about how I wasn't thinking hockey 24/7. And like, I would go to the rink, put in my work, and then kind of be distracted for a bit. So I think that is something that I think finding some type of educational outlet can actually help athletes at different points of their career.
Yeah. So then obviously you got to the NHL. Now you're like financially savvy. I mean, you're an investor, you're doing all these different things. But
yeah,
like,
well,
what would you have done differently? And what would you tell people if they're getting their first payday in athletics?
I think the hardest thing for myself and athletes is, like, you're kind of the first person in your friend group to make a somewhat significant amount of money. So as a result of that, there's some expectations that fall on you that can be very tough to navigate. Like, you go from being, I remember at DU, I think we were getting like $1,200 scholarship checks. I lived in a nice place, so that was like $900, and I had $300 left, and I felt like I was on top of the world. And then all of a sudden, like, you sign an NHL contract and you get $100,000. And at the time, to me, when I was 20 years old, I felt like that was 10 million. So all of a sudden, like, you're at nice fancy restaurants at Shanahan's picking up the bill, and like, after taxes, that's only $50,000. And all of a sudden, you're just picking up, you know what I mean, all these dinner bills. And I was more than happy to do it because it was all my friends, and I was like the first one to have a little bit of success, but I would have been a little bit more responsible, especially at different points. But when you're 20 years old, you don't know better, and I learned a lot, and you think that kind of money is going to just repetitively like come in forever, and then you're retired at 30, and you maybe should have been a little more frugal at different points.
I know all about being frugal. Yeah, I think for me, I had a similar experience, obviously not on the athletic side, but probably the biggest, not downside, but thing that I wish I would have navigated better was after I won the $1 million. Everyone's like, oh, this guy's got all
He's
this
a millionaire.
money.
Yeah.
Like, I had a scary thing, actually. One thing something for everyone to be thoughtful about is just around taxes. I mean, I won the $1 million. That year I made a couple $1 million. I had this huge tax bill. I thought I had all this money, and I had the tax bill, and then I lost $500K in January of 2015. So like, I literally went from like, thought I was like on top of the world to like, oh no, am I going to run out of money? And I definitely made a lot of like foolish things where like, yeah, people are buying crazy champagne or doing all this stuff. And like, oh, this guy's rich. Like, you can pay for everything. And I think that's something that's easy to fall, you hear it all the time. Like, these athletes have their crew and they're supposed to support everyone. And it's just, especially after taxes, it's really hard to do so.
I'll never forget, after I signed, I went right away and played in the American League. And back then you'd still get like a receipt of your paycheck in your stall. And I remember like looking at it thinking it was wrong, because And like I said, in college, when I was busy, when I should have been paying attention, I couldn't believe that half of it was gone before I even touched it. So that was definitely an eye-opening experience to me when I saw my first check.
And you're young too, which is like the other thing that I think people don't realize is like the compounding on your money that you're going to get when you're young to the time that you're 50, 60. Like you make some smart decisions with your young, with your money, you're set up. So that's something that I definitely talk to young people about and wish I would have done certain things differently, but we're still young now and we got to be smart with our capital.
I love talking finance with you. A part of your journey that is not talked about is I think how long did you have a real job for when you were a financial analyst at Schwab?
I was a stockbroker at Schwab for a little over a year. That was during the 2011. So I actually would game kind of the system so that I could play daily fantasy sports. So you had to be, they track every call. So you had to be available or on the phone for 80% of your day. Then you got a lunch and I think 2 breaks. So I would literally be on the phone for 100, I would strive to be 100% until 3 p.m. Mountain Time. I would take my lunch at 3 p.m. and then I would put in my daily fantasy labs till 5 o'clock. And I would just eat all this time where I was supposed to be on the phone. I would just say I was busy or whatever. So I think I did a pretty good job there. I definitely could have done things better, but I was eager to, I think my main motivation in life is not to have, someone having the power of me telling what to do. And that includes a financial boss. So a boss for a job. So I never wanted that. So I was super hungry to get out of Schwab when I was there.
Was there a moment when you were sitting at your desk at Schwab where you were just this is not for me? Or how did you decide to ultimately?
Day one. I was this is not for me. I had to get a job at Charles Schwab because I got stood up in a poker game. I was playing online poker. Online poker got shut down. And then I literally started playing local games and everyone was desperate. This was clearly an inside job, but I had some percentage. I had 10 grand with me or something like that, which is meaningful at the time, especially since I had money locked on poker sites and people came in with guns and took all the money. So at that point, I'm okay, I guess I got to go get a real job. Went back home with my parents and worked at Charles Schwab. And I was okay, how am I going to get out of this? And it was funny. I was actually making more money at Red Rocks than I was at Charles Schwab. And then daily fantasy sports started to be a nice little side income that turned into something I thought would be worthwhile full time.
You have such a hustler's mindset, but tell me, remember we were driving up to Aspen, you were saying that there was one point where you were going from Schwab to Red Rocks to then play poker at Blackhawk and then back to Schwab, and you did this for
that was my craziest stretch. That's the hardest I've ever worked, was during that time. So I had to be at Charles Schwab at 8. At the time we were training, studying for our Series 7, it'd go till 4:30, and then I'd go work Red Rocks concerts, that I'd get there a little late, 5:30, depending on traffic. I'd work till 11 o'clock. We'd go get beers, and then I'd go to Blackhawk to play poker. It's a great time to play poker late at night, so I would do that, and I was super motivated to just try to get out of Charles Schwab. That was my main motivator.
Well, you did it, and then from there, I want to know a little bit, when you got stood up in this poker game, were you done with poker forever then, until you started waxing me again?
I wasn't done forever, but poker was just in a bad spot. You literally, if you wanted to pursue poker, you needed to go to Europe or Canada or somewhere else, and that just wasn't really realistic for me. And I wasn't that great. I was solid. I think my senior year of college, I made $100 grand, which was, I thought I was on top of the world at that time, but I wasn't a great poker player, especially relative to some of my peers. So I was much more excited about daily fantasy sports, which I thought fit kind of my skill set even better. It was a combination of finance, poker, and sports, which were my 3 passions combined.
Another hot topic that's talked a lot about in sports right now is the sports gambling, because obviously it became legal. Everywhere you look, whether it's a TV commercial or on the side of a billboard, there's an advertisement for it. And all of a sudden, guys are starting to get in trouble for it. There needs to be some type of rules or regulatory stuff that's put into place. How did you transition from daily fantasy sports to kind of getting more into the sports betting side of things? And what do you think? Do you think this is going to be a huge problem for America going forward?
Yeah, a couple things there. Sports betting was something I was always intrigued with, and I started to realize that there's more opportunity to kind of scale sports betting than there was daily fantasy sports. I was really lucky to be in DFS the early days when the market was really inefficient. So I was one of the top players, right place, right time. As the years went on, the market got more efficient. It was harder to make sustainable money at scale. And sports betting was really starting to take off in the US. And I thought there was a big business opportunity more so than hey, I can make a lot of money personally. So I started pursuing it from a business standpoint, obviously with the Action Network. And then I met some of the best sports bettors and learned from them. And I think the big thing with sports betting that I know we've talked about is most people are hey, what's the right side today? And I'll say either side could be the right side at the right price. And that's kind of where the finance aspect comes into play, is just understanding that, either side of the game, I'd take the Lakers plus 30 versus the Nuggets, even though I think the Nuggets are going to win. Obviously, that's not the spread, but if you're always getting the right price, you're going to be in a good position. So I think in general, and that's kind of part of the second part, is like most people have no clue what sports betting really is and like how hard it is to actually win, and that they're giving up, 5 cents to 10 cents every time that they bet, when they're just picking sides that they think are right. So understanding that it's really important to get the right price and just thinking about it more from like a financial market standpoint, I think will help the people who are like really interested. But from a casual standpoint, I think it's great entertainment. I just think people need to recognize, it's very, very difficult to win. Less than 1% of people are going to win at sports betting. So I think what's scary and what is bad for society is that these advertisements are going on. Young people are like, oh yeah, sports betting is great. And they go plow their money into it when they're like almost inevitably going to lose. So I think less advertising would be good. I think more education around, hey, this is entertainment. Don't bet a lot. Don't bet more money than you can afford to lose. But I do think it's great for engagement. I mean, skin in the game watching sports is like, to me, the best entertainment in the world. So it's kind of a hard thing. I don't know. What's your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I love it too. And that's like, through our friendship, I've become so much more educated on it. And I think that the other thing that people don't talk about is you lose, they'll take your action forever. And then if you are the 1% of people who actually can find a win, they can just cut you off at any time, and makes it very hard to be successful over a long run anyways.
Yeah, that's really frustrating from a bettor's perspective. And that's the hard part about the whole industry. I mean, the operators are paying so much money in taxes to the state, which I think is good. It's similar to marijuana. You want the money to go towards the state. You want those things to go to good places, which I think is good because people are going to bet regardless. So I do think it's good for the country to have legalized betting. I just think there needs to be more education. And yeah, the hard part, if you do win, they kick you out. And if you don't, they're encouraging you to bet more. And I think more education around that will also be a good thing. So we'll see. The worst thing that's happening that I mean, I'm sure you have friends or peers, like the people going on and like threatening or saying really negative things to athletes is horrible. And that absolutely needs to stop. I mean, so many people are giving like death threats, you stink, all this stuff. Like, you just cost me all this money. It's like, you don't think the athlete is trying their hardest when they have their whole life, like they've worked their whole life. They have huge incentives around performing well. It's really sad to see just kind of the social media stuff. So I hate that. That's my biggest pet peeve, is just like people giving crap to athletes and like, oh, you cost me this. And it's like, yeah, I think how well LeBron played tonight means more to LeBron than it does to you.
100%. I think that through your career in that industry, you've had so many highs and lows. And another thing I respect is you always seem to be able to handle those pretty well and with grace. Is that something you've always been able to do, or is that something you've gotten better at as you've matured?
Yeah, I think I was actually always a pretty good winner. I would win with like relative class. I wouldn't be like shoving in, so I wouldn't get like too high on those, but I was a really bad loser. I would get emotional. I'd blame other people. I wouldn't have the right accountability. I think it's really hard to lose. And I think that's one thing we talked about in the beginning, and just in like the life lessons of playing sports, like learning how to lose well is super important. And people will say, oh, someone who loses well is a loser, but that's not true. Like, everyone's going to have failure, and like be like, okay, this is why I lost. This is how I'm going to get better. I'm going to analyze what I did that was wrong, and like use it as something that you can get growth out of, is the right mindset, versus like trying to blame someone or like be emotionally bad. And I struggled really a lot losing, because I was pretty fortunate early on that things just kind of went well, and I wasn't ready for some of the losses initially, and I did not handle them well. Yeah, one thing we've talked a lot about that I just want to hear more about is just like how losing impacted your career, because young, you're a prodigy playing hockey, you probably never lost growing up, and then you get into the NHL, you maybe get in some bad teams. I know we've discussed this, like that's something you wish you would have done differently.
Yeah, I think my biggest downfall was how I handled adversity. And I think that came from multiple factors, because growing up as a player, in terms of just hockey and hockey only, I very rarely had adversity. I was relatively healthy, didn't have a lot of bad injuries. I was the best or one of the best players at every level. And then all of a sudden I started facing adversity early on as a young guy in the NHL, and I just didn't handle it very well. You talk about like the highs and lows. Like, I would play a good game and I would think like I was the best player in the NHL, and I would play like 2 or 3 bad games without scoring, and I was like, okay, like I need a new job, like I'm ready to retire. And I think that that's just such a bad way to be. And I think you expend so much emotional energy that way. And if you really look at like the best players in the league and a lot of these sports, and guys are able to do it for 15 or 20 years, like they stay relatively even keeled. And I think that, I mean, I can't really relate it to your industry, but I think that definitely in sports, like you see these guys who are able to just sustain success for so long. And it's like being an emotional roller coaster is just not a good way to be as an athlete.
Yeah, it's definitely applicable. I mean, in, DFS or sports betting or, financial investing, if you're going to lose poorly and go on tilt, you're going to blow your bankroll and you're not going to be able to stay in the game. So being able to like be even keel, which I want to talk about the emotion standpoint. That's something my wife and I have chatted a lot about. I think that it's hard to like be emotional the right way in certain situations, but I want to stay on the losing thing because like we've talked about with Nick. Nick was willing to like take a different role, be a great team player.
He was willing to be a robot.
Yeah, and like, why do you think you weren't willing to do that? And like, what would you tell people now?
I would tell people now that I think people in life in general, like, should do whatever job you're doing, like, rather than thinking about like other job, like do that job to the best of your ability. Like Nick went into LA on a team that was loaded. Like at the time, I think they had like Kopitar was their first line center, Jeff Carter was their second line center, and Mike Richards, who are like three, like all guys who are like debatable Hall of Fame players. So Nick was kind of didn't have a chance. So he just like started on the fourth line, and then his job every day was to be like the best fourth line center that he was able to do, like to be. And I think that allowed him to end up playing 300 games in the NHL because he kind of established himself as a great fourth line center, super reliable. And he was also, I will say, like, being a good teammate goes a long way in sports, especially if you're not a star player. Like, I wouldn't say I was a bad teammate, but like Nick is just so well liked by everyone. Yeah. Like was always like.
But you're so well liked in general in life. Like everyone loves being around you. Why do you think you weren't a good teammate?
I think I was a good teammate. I think I butted heads with a lot of coaches because I always, laugh. I always thought I was fucking smarter than everyone in the room.
You might have been smarter than a couple
I was.
of them.
That was the problem. So I was smarter, and that was what was the problem, and that was my biggest downfall because when we're talking about this, it's like you do not, even if your coach is the worst coach in the world, like don't go tell them that you think that they're dumb every day. And it's like Nick didn't say much, you know what I mean? Just followed along. And I think that sometimes like I should have like bit my tongue a little bit.
Yeah, I could see you going in there and just blasting off with the coach what good's going to come from that?
Yeah,
what are you trying to achieve?
And then like when you are on the fourth line, like going back to my other thing, like be the best fourth line center that you can be. But I'd be on the fourth line, rolling my eyes, like just pissed off, like thinking I should be on the first or second line. And I mean, it's sad and comical and all of the above, like looking back, because there's so many things that like I learned and wish I would have done differently. But I think I'm still trying to find it that like those experiences are ultimately going to lead me to have way more success post-hockey than I had in the game of hockey.
Yeah, using any adversity to grow from it is the key. One thing that I really struggle with that I'm really going to work on, that I'm working on, but I want to make a huge part of my life going forward, that I think you struggle with as well, is all the athletics, all the different endeavors, especially in where you have like super high highs, low lows, and it's constantly happening. It really dilutes emotion for you. And for me, especially with like the ADD brain too, I struggle sometimes to be present in really important situations. And I feel like I've been trained to be unemotional. And sometimes it's really important to be emotional, especially like looking forward as a dad. You have daughters, I have a girl, I have a son. Like I want to be present and like emotionally there for them. So it's something that I really want to work on. And I think you and I both kind of struggle with that, given just we have so many ups and downs on a daily basis even now. So how do you think about that? Do you think it's a challenge? I mean, I know there's so many situations where like a family member dies or something really bad happens and I'm just even keeled.
Yeah, I feel like I'm more of the like opposite in some terms, in a sense that I feel like all of my days are either like 10s or 3s. And I think what that leads you to do is
threes.
Not 3s. I don't mean it like 3s. Okay, I just mean I'm very high and very low.
Okay.
But I think that being present is something that I really need to work on, especially like my biggest thing is like being present with the people I care about, like just like mainly my family, and then I obviously have friends, but like, and my wife gets on me a lot about this, but it's like when you're at home, like no matter what time you come home, how long you're gone, when you're at home, like be present. But I have such a hard time, especially now with like playoffs and stuff going on. I'm on my phone, I'm watching TV, I'm, as you know, calling someone, like playing with my daughters. I have 20 things going on at the same time. And I think that sometimes that can lead people, like kind of rub people the wrong way in certain circumstances. And it's something that I need to work on.
Yeah, it's something I absolutely need to work on. And it is just so important to be present. I think the phones are a huge distraction. Like, we should both set aside our phones at times. It's hard though. It's really hard when you feel like, yeah, my office door is always open in all my businesses, and I feel it's one of the strengths is just always being available, but at what cost? And that's something, as I've gotten older, especially now with a family, it's like, what are your priorities? And I think we're both family first guys, so we need to be better.
A funny dynamic we have, we didn't know each other that well. We were trying to coordinate for something, and you'd always send your daily calendar to me. And I laughed because you're basically calling me a pigeon, telling me to check your schedule. But you were really, I know you now, were just being nice, telling me when you could get alone. But I noticed on your block schedule, you block Super Dad on your calendar every day. Was that something you came up with, or you saw somewhere and that helps you kind of lock in at home?
I've seen that in certain areas, and that's something that I think is actionable, is blocking off time. And I think the most successful people who are genuinely happy, know when they're going to be doing things. So like, one thing that works great, I also have the gym blocked off in the morning. And like, you're now part of our gym crew. How great is it to go in, unplug, fully focus, have fun? Like, we get a great workout in, then you get the steam, sauna, whatever, and like, you feel ready for the day. That is like a habit, is incredible, and it's going to pay huge dividends throughout our life. We get all the camaraderie, we get the, fitness stuff, which is super important. So like, that's become a great habit. The Super Dad is an aspirational habit. I think I've done an okay job, but I definitely need to be better. My wife would give me a ton of crap. She'd say that I'm on my phone and checking crypto prices and taking calls and whatever else during that window at times. But broadly, I'm very committed to that time, and it's awesome. Like, how lucky, like when you look back in your life, like these are the great times to spend with your kids.
What time does your gym block start at?
8 to 10 is what I have blocked off.
Aren't you normally there at 8:45?
I am there at 8:45 because I should be 8:30. Super Dad is in the morning, and it should be till 8:30 because that's when our nanny gets there. But
I know you are working a lot of times when you're late. You do a ton of different spaces on Twitter where you've built a pretty big following. Also talking about NFTs. For people, like, I'm very naive when it comes to a lot of this stuff. Just talk a little bit about NFTs and the ones you own, where you see the industry going. Just teach me a little bit about it.
So in crypto, I think there's a variety of things to kind of just start. If you're just getting into crypto, I think the first thing to understand is that Bitcoin is kind of a separate asset class, especially now as we record with the ETF being passed. Bitcoin essentially, to me, is digital gold. It's been deemed a store of value. The reason that gold's had value for a long time is that people have used it as a means of exchange forever. And Bitcoin now has been a store of value for 13, 14 years. And now we have an official ETF that's backed by BlackRock and Fidelity. It's become a huge part of the system. So it's a clear store of value. It's a simple use case. It's literally just, in my eyes, digital gold. And the great thing about it versus gold is, if I have a partner in Singapore, I can send them money and they can get it in 30 seconds. Whereas if you want to move gold, obviously that's a lot harder. So
if I lose money to you in poker, I can just send
Bitcoin.
Even if it's on Saturday and Sunday.
If I get stung by you on all the birdies, maybe I'll send you some Bitcoin
Perfect.
today.
Glad it takes some Bitcoin today. Thank you.
Yeah, multiple Bitcoins today with all those birdies. But so Bitcoin's separate. I would view Bitcoin as just digital gold, store of value, something to transact with. It's not something that I think will ever be used for like a cup of coffee, but big transactions, Bitcoin makes a ton of sense. Then you have the kind of the rest of the crypto ecosystem, and there's a lot of different protocols. And I got obsessed with crypto, kind of learning about Ethereum. And there's so many really cool applications within the Ethereum protocol, including NFTs. So NFTs, I think, long-term, we still need to see more use cases. But what really exploded in 2021 was digital art, collectibles. And I think we'll see other things, but those were kind of the main things. And then there's a lot of speculation around them. So the way I allocated capital to NFTs was originally through NBA Top Shot, who had a partnership with the NBA. That made sense to me. That was a huge, it was a crazy run up. Didn't sell anything. That was stupid. I probably had $100,000 that turned into a couple $1 million. Did not sell any because we had a partnership with the company. That was one of my bigger mistakes. The second thing I allocated to was a huge one. That was CryptoPunks. And CryptoPunks were kind of the first NFT. Not the actual first, but the first mainstream NFT. Those are the profile pictures, and those were given away for free. And I think a lot of what has value long-term in crypto is going to be kind of the history and then also just the ethos of what it was. And they were just like, hey, this is a really cool new application within the Ethereum protocol. We can issue out these tokens, these NFTs, and we can put images on them. And literally, they just spun up these 10,000 CryptoPunks, and those went from hundreds of dollars to, I was part of a group that bought a CryptoPunk for $16.8 million. So it's pretty wild to see the trajectory of those. I made a lot of mistakes, invested in a bunch of crap. There's a bunch of snake oil salesmen that got into NFTs. But I do think it's a really cool application. I think it could be amazing for tickets. The one area that is so obvious is gaming. I mean, people pay tons of money for like Fortnite skins and different things, and all that money just goes to the developer. So if you had an open ecosystem where, the money could go back and forth between people and stay with people versus going to a developer, I think that can make a lot of sense long term. There's clubs that are around NFTs now. There's going to be some use cases, but we need to see more utility and value come from that use case.
Your Twitter profile is a CryptoPunk?
Yeah.
Is that right? So what price did you buy that at?
I don't know if I told you this story. This is a good one.
I haven't heard it. Let's hear it.
I first got into CryptoPunks in February of 2021. My daughter was born on February 23rd. So I bought a couple CryptoPunks. They started going crazy because Gary Vee actually was promoting them, and Gary Vee had told all his friends to buy them. And they literally went from, I think the first one I bought was for like 18 grand. They went from like 18 grand to 100 grand within like weeks. And I literally was just flipping them from like different things. I learned what was valuable, what wasn't. And I flipped like 4 or 5 of them into like 90 Ethereum. And I bought the one that I still have today. That's my profile picture in the parking lot of the hospital before we went in for the birth of my daughter.
Was Ashley present in the car when you were searching around buying this?
I was like, hey, great news. We had just sold our company. I didn't really have a job, and I'm like, good news. I just spent $270,000 on this Pixel. What do you think? But she's always been really supportive, and I think that's the one thing I've been really lucky with is my wife, and Ashley's been by my side for all my crazy endeavors. So she had some faith in me that it would work out. And at one point in time, I did turn down a $2 million offer for the thing that I paid. I think it was a little less than a couple hundred grand, maybe like 180, 190 at the time. That may have been a mistake, but I think there's still long-term value in CryptoPunks.
Speaking of NFTs, you've been very successful in your career investing in these companies that have produced tremendous profit for a lot of people. I think that's one of the reasons you're so well loved. But you have had one that's been giving you, one of your investments has been causing you, I wouldn't say problems, but just like hasn't gone as well as all the other home runs have gone. Talk about what you've learned from that and just what you would have done differently.
Yeah, well, I think definitely making money for people is a good way to
yeah,
it's better to make money than to lose money for people. And unfortunately with Lucky Trader, we're still operating the company. I'm trying to get the best outcome possible for our investors, but made all the mistakes that you can make. We had just sold our business in May of 2021. We were on top of the world. We got a crazy number. We got really, really lucky, honestly, with the business selling kind of at the peak of the mania in 2021. I thought whatever I touched would turn to gold, which was foolish and arrogant. So that was kind of the first issue, is just having too much pride. And there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance. And I think I was teetering more towards arrogance, which I really pride myself staying more on like just being confident versus that threshold. So we raised a bunch of money. We were going viral with NBA Top Shot. Mark Cuban was a co-founder, invested. I was like, hey, Mark, this is the new thing. He was really into it. So he's like, yeah, throw my name on there. Here's $500K. We raised $1.5 million in the first round. We had $10 million plus of open interest. Like literally could have raised any amount of money that we wanted with no product, no team, no plan.
People believed in you.
Yeah, they believed in us. And I didn't take that seriously enough. So then we raised more money after that with like a little bit of a plan, the start of a team, and we were raising at crazy high valuations. And I'm just like, yeah, this is great. We have all this, why not raise at a $25 million valuation with no product, no team, no, profits or whatever. So we made a lot of mistakes raising that money. And then we were in a situation where in order to get our investors a return and like basically validate the raise, we needed to build a huge business. So we acquired companies, we built this huge team. We were burning hundreds of thousands of dollars a month without a real plan. And that was just a huge mistake. Fast forward to today, we're break even, on the verge of being profitable, which I'm really proud of, but there's no reason that we should have ever raised that amount of capital at that valuation. And the biggest challenge I have now is that it's going to be very hard to get even the money back to our investors. And that was a huge mistake. So I think for anyone trying to build a business, you should be really thoughtful when you take capital in, because you want to be on the side of returning a win for your investors.
You've done that your whole career on everything.
And it's so important, and that will compound for you in so many different ways. Losing on something, one loss can hurt you in a huge way. So that was a huge mistake. We were kind of riding the mania. I think some of the things we did were smart, but we definitely made a lot of mistakes, and I'm paying for it today. I mean, from an opportunity cost standpoint, I have other endeavors that merit me spending a lot of time, and I'm still spending time on Lucky Trader, even though there's not much financial upside for me, because I want to do right by my investors. But I'm paying for the sins that I made in the past.
You talked about it's a great way to be friends with people when you're making them a lot of money. How many people on a random Sunday are texting you, asking who you like on certain games?
Yeah, and that's a hard thing. People message all the time, and
why are you rolling your eyes like it's me?
No, it's not.
I have for sure.
But you give me your opinions too. I get Drew's opinion.
Am I the only non-professional in your business who's texting you on a Sunday with their own opinion?
Yeah, your opinions are right. I mean, sometimes you veto my opinion. I mean, you're
that
the smartest guy.
Historically very well for me, but I do like to stand my ground sometimes.
Yeah, well, you have to have your own opinions. It happens all the time, and it's just a bad situation, because if you do well, it doesn't really matter. You're expected to do well, and if you lose, then you get stories like, hey, I did really well on this. And I have touted a couple things. Most of them have gone well, but most recently I told everyone that Steph Curry and Klay Thompson were going to whoop Kelsey and Mahomes. I thought I had great intel. Steph's a scratch plus golfer, and they got smoked. And that was extra frustrating because...
What were the text messages like after that?
Just brutal. It got brought up today on the golf course. I told one of the guys, he's like, made the biggest bet he ever has on that. I thought it was a lock. And that's the thing. There's just downside to basically giving people your opinion when if things go well, you don't get any credit. If things go bad, you're going to hear about it. So I try to be really thoughtful about it. Obviously, I want to help my friends, especially if we're like watching the game together. I'll give my opinion. And again, it comes back to price. Like I'm hoping to have like a 2 to 5% ROI, which means winning at like 57, 58%. So a lot of the times you're
everyone
still going to lose.
Everyone thinks you go 95%.
Yeah, it's like, oh, great better. They're going to win 100% of their bets. Not the case at all.
I learned a lot about this industry from you in terms of like price, but a lot of people, like you said, the 99% of people who do lose in this business are so uneducated about it. And you recently launched a really cool company to help educate people about it called Unabated. Talk about how you decided to build that company, where that company's at now, and how people can check it out.
Yeah, really proud of Unabated. It's a really cool company. And basically there's a variety of services and tools and content on the site, but the crux of it is basically an odds screen where you compare prices. So most people just sign up and they're like, hey, I'm going to go on DraftKings or FanDuel, and they're just going to use one book. And that is a huge, huge problem for most people, because you're not going to be able to compare prices at different places. So on any given game, DraftKings might have one price, FanDuel might have another price, MGM might have another price. And in the early days, there was actually arbitrage where you could bet both sides of the game and make money because the prices were so different. So it's always important to get the best price, and Unabated will really help you with that. And that's my biggest advice to anyone who wants to take betting even remotely seriously is like, hey, make sure you have different books so that you can always get the right price. And Unabated has all those odds in real time, and will actually show you, hey, you're interested in the Nuggets game tonight? This is the book with the best price. And just even doing that, if you're just going to say, hey, I'm going to go off my own opinion and I'm not going to do anything else, and you get the best price, you'll go from losing anywhere from like 5 to 10% on your money to breaking even.
That's super cool.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and yeah, we're building a lot of stuff, and it's gone really well. And I love building products that genuinely help people, and that's something I'm proud about with Unabated. So it's gone well, and we're actually seeing a lot of growth. We've done a lot of YouTube content, which has done well, and we're lucky that we have great engineers and data science, but also other professional bettors who have given a lot of insights and really helped build a product that I think provides a lot of value. And what makes me really proud is I know other professional bettors who are reliant on the software. So I know we've built something great.
Your story has kind of transitioned from this kid who won this daily fantasy thing, who then spun up all these businesses. And I want to know, you're in so many different industries. Are there certain guys who you've really leaned on or looked up to for advice during your career, or just even as from afar, like mentors to you?
Something I want more of in my life for sure is mentors. Mark's been an incredible mentor. One of the guys I work with, this guy Kevin, who's been a co-founder with us in a variety of endeavors. He's an engineer. He also sees the field from a high level, just making strategic business decisions better than anyone. And he's the kindest person, most selfless person I've ever met. So we've been peers working together, but I admire him so much, and he's just given me great life lessons. So I've been really fortunate. And then I just have a ton of really good friends, some older folks too, who've been really great in terms of, providing mentorship around being a dad and just how to live your life. But candidly, it's something that I'm looking for. Like, I'm actively seeking more mentorship. And, as I get older, it's something I hope I can provide to other people, but I think it's so important. And one thing I see with other successful younger people is broadly, they think they're the smartest guy in the room, and they don't look for advice. They just think they know everything. And I think it's really important to get advice, and I'm actively looking for more mentors.
I think one of the reasons you've been successful is because you don't think you're the smartest person in the room, but you're able to do such a good job surrounding yourself with the smartest people in the room. And it seems like everything you do. Like, I can ask
That's
you,
the name of the game.
Like, I can ask you a question about anything, and you're like, you have some group chat with literally like the smartest people in the world in this space. And I think that there's sometimes a stereotype about people having to be like so like cutthroat, egotistical. But I think one of your biggest strengths is your ability to know that you're not the smartest in the room, but you surround yourself basically in every situation with them.
I've been very lucky in that way. I want to hear about mentors in your life too. But Brandon Adams, who you met, he's been incredible, just knows so much about the markets and just so savvy. So, I mean, it's like poker. If you sit down and you can't figure out who the fish is, like, it's probably you. In life, like, if you can't figure out who the smart people are, like, how are you going to be successful in these things? So I've always tried to find people who are exceptional at whatever their craft is, and figure out ways I can provide value to them and build relationships with people who are really great. And that's been, honestly, in sports and in DFS, I'm so far away from being the smartest guy in the room, not even close. I've been lucky to have friendships and partners that are the brightest, and that's been incredible, and that'll pay huge dividends.
One of your partners is now a close friend of mine who I think we might be going to dinner with later, Steve Bass. And you guys do almost everything, whether it's an investment, whether it's daily fantasy. You guys are basically 50-50 partners in almost everything that you do. How did you guys meet each other? And you have such different personality types, but seem to make the perfect team. I want to learn a little bit about the team dynamics.
Yeah, so coming back to Swing Easy, we met on the golf course through a mutual friend. So Steve was an All-American tennis player at Notre Dame. I believe got the top 5 in the country, beat Isner. I mean, he had an incredible tennis career, but like a lot of athletes, I mean, he actually was in the worst sport, where tennis, even if he got to the 100th in the world, which I think he could have gotten top 100, he's never going to be able to make it something that supported himself and his family. So he started spending time in poker and different things. And a mutual friend of ours, Shane Sigsby, who played golf at Notre Dame, set up a golf round where we got to play. And he was moving to Colorado. His wife, Christian, who's also an absolute superstar, her and her sister were #1 in the country in tennis, was coaching the DU tennis team. So small world, DU connection. And he was moving out to kind of get really close with her. I know he wanted to get married to her and have a family. And fortunately that came together. And Steve and I just became the fastest friends. I mean, we played on the golf course. We were both playing horrific on the front 9. And Steve somehow was playing worse than me. And he pressed me on 10. I'm like, this is my guy. So we just had so much in common. We started playing golf together. And I kind of coming back to the same thing we talked about earlier on the golf course, you just get to learn so much about someone. Like, how do they handle hitting a great shot? Are they going to be super arrogant about it and not shut up about it? How are they going to be graceful with it? How do they handle hitting a horrible shot? Are they going to cheat on the golf course? Are they going to be friendly to other people? You get to see someone's character so quickly. And I just got to learn so much about Steve, and I admire so many of his qualities. He's such an honest, hardworking hustler that we did a bunch of stuff together, and we were fortunate to have success early on. One thing that you may know is our first Sunday working together,
Got waxed.
we got smoked. And Steve and all just are like, it was at the time when I really was like one of the best players in the world, and I wasn't cocky, but I was like very confident. And I don't know how much money Steve had, but we lost like 6 figures worth on a Sunday. And I think that was probably a pretty big deal to Steven at the time.
How do you
and I
handle
was
that?
like, oh, dude, don't worry. And he handled it great. Like, didn't say anything. And fortunately, we did extremely well right after. But that was a funny. I learned a lot about Steven, that he wasn't like freaking out, hey, we got to end this. Even though kind of knowing what I know now, that was probably a decent chunk of his net worth. that we just lost on the first Sunday. That he was trusting me that I was going to do a good job. And fortunately, the next week went great, and then we had a great year, and been very fortunate to have a lot of success together. Mostly because Steven is just such a hustler, and he's a winner. I mean, he really is.
He wins at everything. I mean, he beat me at tennis left-handed, serving underhand. And one thing I was going to let you go with is Steve would say that your highest ROI of any investment you've ever made in your life is betting on Steve athletically.
Steve wouldn't
and
say
his
that.
lowest would be yours.
Steve wouldn't say that. I would say that. I've gotten incredible returns betting on Steve and everything. I mean, he beat our other mutual friend Adam Levitan with a frying pan. He's had he's been so clutch. He's been great at everything. Steve's always won for me, and I just consistently let him down. We've just got some good team wins, so we're building back. But it's you always want to win for other people more than you want to win for yourself sometimes. And I think that's one of the great things about sports.
Your guys' personality is so different that it reminds me so much of my relationship with my brother Nick, because we do everything together, but our personality type couldn't be more opposite. Do you think that helps you guys in certain situations?
Yeah, I think we have some strengths that are really similar, and then we have opposite weaknesses in certain things, and then other strengths that are really complementary. So that's great, but we get along and we think kind of life in a similar way. So yeah, we can talk, just like you and I can talk about anything. Steve and I can talk literally, use the poker now. We can go through hand histories on every different, poker hand that you have in life. So he's been just a great friend, and I've learned so much from him. And he has strengths that I don't have. So I'm really lucky to be partners with him.
One question I'd love to ask people is, you've had a ton of success, highs, lows, you've always bounced back. What does the ultimate success look like for you in 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, in 5 to 10 years, it's tough. I've been thinking about it a lot just in general. And I think one thing that's really important right now is that we're very blessed. I mean, we have freedom to do what we want. I mean, look at our day to day. We have a healthy family. So I'm really trying to enjoy the journey. And I think at times I'm always just go, and trying to achieve more. So I'm trying to be more present and trying to enjoy the times now. But yeah, it's the same kind of mindset that I think will be what I'm looking forward to in 5 to 10 years, is that I'm in control of my time. I want to wake up, do what I want. I want to do something fitness oriented with my friends. I want to be there for my family. I want to have financial freedom. I want to be spending time with people that I love. And I don't want to be doing anything as a trade. I don't want to be saying, hey, I have to go spend my time to do this because I need to make money, or I need to impress this person, or whatever else. I want to be doing things that are intentional with the people that I really love.
That was a great answer.
What about you? What do you want in 5 to 10 years?
I mean, a lot of the same things. I want to have a job that I love from a business standpoint, that I love waking up and I'm passionate about. I want to have a family who's healthy. My wife will kill me for saying this, but another baby, maybe.
Really?
I don't know. Yeah, but
what are the odds that you get a third?
Zero. They're done.
So that's your aspiration.
The general manager has closed the door on that decision.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I really just want to, like I said, I feel like sometimes you and I are wired the same way, that I have struggled with. We're so blessed, but we have such high goals and have trouble being content in certain situations. And I really do want to find a way to be content, be present in certain moments, while still trying to set a high bar for success and achievement. And I think that, I don't know, there's certain things happen in life that you just see that really put things in perspective. And unfortunately, sometimes it takes one of those things to happen. Kenzie's here, but I have a buddy, Rhett Rakshani, who is in California, who's got a very sick wife right now. And I don't even know why I brought this up, but you see people going through hard times, that sometimes just having a blessed day with healthy people is all you can ask for.
Oh, your health is everything, and just having the right people.
One of the last questions I have before I let you go is, you always are learning. Where you talked about as a kid, you were investing in mutual funds as a 9-year-old. What is some of the best content that you read or podcasts that you listen to on a daily basis?
I love this question. I ask everyone what their content diet is. I think it's so important. And we live in an age where literally you can consume anything. You can go out and find any niche that you want to get into. you can find content on anything, and you can go find the smartest people talking about things they're passionate about. So I think it's so important.
And I think the craziest thing, as a guy as smart as you told me your favorite thing is to listen to Betting the Limit every episode.
That's true. I love it. I mean, I listen to every episode. I get great insights from you. But there's so much great content out there. I mean, there's so many good podcasts. I love the My First Million podcast. The All In podcast has exploded. I've listened to every episode of that. I remember when that came out in COVID. I love Bill Gurley and Brad Gershner have this BG2 or BG Squared podcast that's come out that's been awesome. Invest Like the Best. I mean, I could go on and on. There's so many great podcasts, and I always ask people, what's in your content diet? And I get a lot of great responses, and I try to check stuff out. And then in general, one kind of related, but I think super important thing is if you have a strong view on something or you're consuming content on a topic, you should be able to argue both sides. So if you say, hey, I think this is the way something is, like I'm really bullish on Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin's going to, like I said earlier, I think it could overtake gold. You better be able to argue the other side of why Bitcoin is not a good investment. And I think it's really important for people in general to be able to understand their views, but also argue the other side. I'm always skeptical of people who can only deliver one side of the argument because they haven't thought through the whole process. And I'm more inclined to believe someone's view if they can argue everything about it.
Well, I don't think you're truly an expert in anything unless you can argue both sides about it.
Of course, you should be able to know both sides of everything. So what's your content diet? What would give me some of the stuff
I have
that
a
you...
wide range of content. I mean, I'm a big podcast guy. I like to listen to, I'm a My First Million listener. I like to listen to some of the niche hockey podcasts. I like to, in terms of stuff I like consume online.
You love investing. Where do your investment takes come from?
So I was very lucky when I did sign that first contract. Rather than, it's funny, like a lot of these people in wealth management are very aggressive to young athletes. And so when I did sign that first contract, I was getting approached by tons of different people to manage my money and stuff like that. And one of Quinton's relationships, his dad was a guy named Scott Shozel, who basically said, rather than hiring a financial advisor or wealth manager, or whatever you want to call it at the time, basically just call him whenever I make my first dollar. And I called him, and as we talked about, I never studied finance in school, never really had a passion for it. And he basically told me where to put 80% of my money, and then said, if you ever want to learn the finance game, you do whatever you want with 20% of your money. So from a very young age, at 20 years old, I would take 20% of my money, and I tried every strategy in the world, from buying 25 different stocks to buying one put option to buying everything. And through a ton of kind of trials and errors, it really helped me learn kind of how that side of the world works.
What's the biggest mistake you've made investing?
Oh, hands down. So I got that first check, which I think like a $92,000. So after tax was probably $45,000. And Scott, of all people, told me that one of the coolest things I learned from him is to like bet on people. And he was very close with Elon Musk at the time. And he told me that Elon Musk will be successful. So no matter what, he didn't know if I was going to be in the car business, didn't know if it was going to be with something else, but he's just like, this guy will be successful. So of course, I probably put 95% of my net worth in Tesla at the time.
Do you remember it was trading yet?
Yeah, I know. Well, it's split so many times since then, but like it doubled in like 3 months. And I remember, I'll never forget
smart.
this. Oh, I thought it was super. I was at Chaos Pizza, and I was having a meeting with Nick, and I think Nick had less money at the time, but he had 95% of his money, and we were the biggest Tesla bulls ever.
Great.
And we met with these guys, and I think they were from either Morgan Stanley or JP Morgan, and they asked what my investment portfolio was like, and I told them I had 95% of my net worth at the time in Tesla, and they just thought that was awful, and it was going to zero, and somehow after that convinced me to sell it, and we sold it pretty shortly after that, and we doubled our money at the time in about 6 weeks, but I think that would, whatever it was, 40 grand would have been worth
many
millions. So I mean,
did those guys get your business? Did you give them your money?
Of course not. And actually, it's funny. I'm actually still friends with those guys, and they do a great job at what they do. And I know that, I mean, to telling a 20-year-old that they should have 95% of their money in a very speculative growth stock at the time was probably the right advice. But whenever...
Is it though? If you're going to take a huge risk, obviously you want to compound. Maybe 95% is high, but like 50% is probably okay. It's that's not a smart way to look at it, but if you're going to learn lessons, you're 20 years old, your income potential is super high. Obviously, you want to compound money, set aside 50% in a more traditional strategy. But if you're going to learn, having exposure to one stock it can't be the worst.
Well, yeah, and I mean,
Especially when you're trying to build wealth. It's like you want diversity to preserve wealth, to build wealth, you want concentration.
I talk to this. My third brother Quentin works in real estate all the time, so he's real estate. I talk about all the time that like I think that real estate is a great investment for people who are very wealthy and want to get more wealthy, but it's very hard for people to start real estate who don't have a lot of capital.
The only counter to that is you get leverage. So I know a lot of people, especially in my world, that have been extremely aggressive, bought a lot of property, used leverage, and that's the way you can make big returns. But of course, leverage is great in a bull market. In a bear market, that can absolutely ruin you.
What's the biggest financial mistake you've made?
I was not ready for that one. I mentioned the tax story where I made all the money, had the huge tax bill, and then lost a lot. That was definitely my biggest overall mistake, was not managing my bankroll in that regard. Probably in 2021, by far the biggest financial mistake that I've made is I thought I was a genius in 21. I thought everything I touched would turn to gold. And instead of taking, we sold the business, I had all this capital come in, had these huge wins, and I allocated a huge percentage of it into private companies that are illiquid. And even if those private companies work out, I was forced to then make decisions after the fact, and even to this day, where, I have a huge percentage of my money in these private companies that are not liquid. So if you have it in the market or real estate or wherever else, you might be able to loan against that. No one's going to give me a loan on my 3 or 4% of this private business or whatever else. So I think there's a place for that, but I put way too much of my capital into private investments, and I paid dearly for that.
Speaking of private investments, I remember when my brother and I decided we had this crazy idea to start a company called Swing Easy. We sat with you at Cherry Hills, and you kind of were immediately invested in it and had no problem writing a check. And that was something that our friendship...
What did I learn?
Our friendship wasn't even that strong at the time, but I'll never forget just that support. You were just all involved, and I just wanted to thank you for that. And
well, you invest in people. That has been my overall thesis in general, and I've heard that from a lot of smart people. Scott saying that I think is spot on, and I just knew that you were a winner, and I wanted to bet on you. So I was convinced that was a good play, and I think it's been amazing to start building this with you. That being said, should I be allocating more money into private investments after I said it was my big blunder? I've been very selective, so I think that's actually one of my only private investments in the last couple of years.
One of the things, I do not have a lot of business experience, but I think that for the first time in my life, I've taken a check of someone else's money. And I mean, that's one of the reasons that I'm so determined for this to be a smashing success, is because I do not want to let the few people who I reached out to originally and really believed in it down. So I think that it's fun being on, like, it's almost a new game for me in a sense that, like, it's a different kind of pressure, because when you're playing sports your whole life, I mean, yeah, you're playing for other people, but you're kind of just betting on yourself. But now you have other people betting on you for the first time. And it's one of those situations that I actually really love it and feel like it's something that I want to do more of and want to be super successful for those people who did believe in it.
Yeah, it's a huge responsibility. We talked about that earlier, but taking other people's capital, you want to win for them, and it's a huge responsibility. So I think it's great. I think Swing Easy is going to be super successful. What are you most excited about with Swing Easy?
I'm most excited about just learning from cool, different people who are experts in their field. And I think that as an athlete, I was so focused my whole life on just athletics and hockey. And now that I see, like, there's this whole world outside of sports, and so many people like you, for example, who have spent your whole life doing certain things. Like, I love learning from those people. And I think that ultimately my success will be determined by if I'm able to surround myself with enough of those people. I think that that's something, and take even a little bit of like learning from each of those different people. So I think that providing people a platform and a community where people can really kind of connect, like grow and win together, is going to be unstoppable.
Yeah. We got Mackenzie over there. She's putting on these great events. I think it's going to be killer. I think if we do a great job with events, we can build a community where there is a lot of value that's created. So I think the best relationships truly are built through sports. That's the part of the idea that you and I are just in sync on. You just learn so much about people's character, and obviously sports aren't for everyone. So there are other obviously great ways, but for guys like us, I think there's a group of people that really get a lot of value out of that. And I think if we put on the right events and can help curate relationships, I mean, that's how the best bonds are built. I mean, we've become such close friends, and I think a lot of that's through sports.
Yeah, I mean, I think that during my first year of retirement, when I was full midlife crisis, like I had way too much time on my hands to think, but every opportunity I've been provided in my life, and whether that's friendship, business, or anything, has come from a result of sports. And I think that I'm just so excited to build something around that. And I hope to be able to, it's funny, is like when you're an athlete, like you're able to get into any room in the world. And a lot of athletes don't take advantage of that. But then when you retire from athletics, not all those doors close, but a lot of them close.
Really? I actually, we never talked about this. So like, what has changed the most from being in the league or playing sports versus retired?
Because when you walk into, I think one of the things guys struggle with, and it's like weird admitting, but I did too, like you walk into any social circle and tell someone you're a professional athlete, like people are interested in it. People think it's cool. People want to know about some story or why you did score, didn't score, whatever. But then like when you walk into the same room and like you're a retired athlete, like people don't care. So I think that like something I encourage guys to do is to like go into those rooms, learn those rooms. And I think that that's just something that it's a weird, like you go through almost like this self-identity crisis because you don't want the game to be everything you're about, but at the same time, like that game gets you into all these different rooms. So find that like taking advantage of that while you're still playing is like, I harp on that with guys all the time because it's something that guys don't do, I didn't do, but they should do because like I said, some of those doors do close once you're retired.
Yeah. And we can end on this. I want to hear, I know a lot of ex-athletes who've gotten into the sports world and done different things, whether it's through announcing. I've done content with a lot of ex-athletes. They get into a variety of things in sports. And I've seen a lot of people fail because they're kind of chasing what they had in athletics. And other people have found success, but I see a lot of people really struggling. I think that's one really cool thing about Swing Easy is that it can be a great place for retired athletes to transition to something that is successful versus just chasing the highs of what they experienced in sports.
No, I think that more athletes need to lean into their story, but not in their story in the sense that like they need to stay in the game, but they should use that story because like they have so many characteristics. And like we talked about, you learn so many things that like they're great hires for a company. Like I hope to be a CEO of a company one day. And like, I want to
hope you are a CEO.
I want to retire, but I mean, I want that company to be like right now we have a small group of people working for us. I hope ultimately there's 100 people, but like when I see athlete on a resume, that's like you're flipping through 100 resumes and you see a guy you see Baker Shore played hockey and was the captain of Harvard, you're like eyes perk up and you're immediately interested in it. Whereas like, not to say that you just flip through other resumes, but it's definitely something that like pops people's eyes out on the screen. So I think that more guys need to kind of lean into their experiences in athletics. And as I'm learning like a lot from people, like you can make up the ground of inexperience if you have some of the qualities that are necessary to be successful in anything that you do.
And I think sports is 100% that. Like you said, it's on a resume. I know that if someone's been able to get to a certain level, maybe there's the freaks that are just so talented they could screw off and get somewhere. But for the most part, you have to put in sacrifice. You have to work hard. You have to learn it. You have to, especially in team sports, you have to learn how to play well with other people. So I think it's a huge thing. And I would rather work into my business experience. I always look to people who have athletic experience. And it's funny. I mean, we've talked a little bit about this, but if someone doesn't have like a high IQ or like awareness in a sporting, like playing sports, I'm concerned. And in the opposite, even if they're not talented, but they're aware, that's like, okay, I want to work with that person.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, like you said, like sports in general, golf, like they reveal a lot about a person's characters and just like the character and like the way that they look at life in general. So, I mean, there's nothing I want to do more than kind of hit your Swing Easy investment out of the park and return you a bunch of money and surround ourselves with a lot of like-minded individuals and we can all win together.
Yeah. Just need to create value for people.
Thanks for coming on. I know I took a lot of your time and I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, Drew.